Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Make sure my mic is on. Y'all can hear me back there? Good, thanks. Well, first, thanks, Jay, and thanks for this wonderful invitation to join you here at Moody College. As the Dean mentioned, I graduated from then the College of Communication back in 1977. So I started in 1975 in the college. And I'd like to tell you that the reason I came to the School of Communication was for all the right altruistic reasons, that I wanted to be maybe an investigative reporter, that I wanted to. The real reason is I started off in pre-med. I couldn't do that. Tried that for a year. I went to accounting. I really did not do well in accounting. And I wanted to get a commission in the military. And it turns out I could write. And I enjoyed the craft and the art of writing. So midway through my 4 years, I came over to the school and have never, ever regretted it. And I'm always asked, you had a degree in journalism, what good was that in the military? And I will tell you, a journalism degree or an English degree or the ability to communicate in the military is probably the single most important talent and trait you need. I have done tens of thousands of briefs from presidents to privates. I've written communications for heads of state all around the world. You have to be able to communicate as a military leader. I also have in this new job, I have a speechwriter, John Morton, who I think John is here tonight. Great speechwriter. John, where are you? Oh, there you are. Yes, I'm going to embarrass you, John. John wrote me a wonderful speech for the event tonight. But I'm not going to use it. And poor John, he's kind of gotten used to this. I've decided to kind of go off script. But John is a wonderful speechwriter. I want to make sure people understand that. So what I want to talk about tonight is three things. I want to talk a little bit about leadership. I want to talk about leaders as communicators. And then I want to talk about communicators as leaders. So in the military, everybody must read the seminal work On War by Karl von Clausewitz. And Karl von Clausewitz was a great Prussian military strategist. And Clausewitz once wrote about war, everything in war is easy. It's just the easy things are difficult. Everything in war is easy, it's just the easy things are difficult. Well, back in about 2009, I was heading back to Afghanistan and I picked up a copy of Foreign Affairs magazine. And I'm reading the magazine and there were two articles by two PhDs from Ivy League schools. And interestingly enough, the articles were very similar. And as I'm reading them, the PhDs are lamenting the fact that the United States military really just doesn't get it in Afghanistan. That the way to win the war in Afghanistan is to build roads. If you just build roads, you could win the war in Afghanistan. No kidding. Build roads. Why didn't we think of that? Because when people are shooting at you and they're trying to blow you up, it's hard to build roads. Everything in war is easy. It's just the easy things are difficult. And that's the same thing with leadership. I could sit up here on a whiteboard and I could list all the things you need to do as great leaders. Lead from the front, set the example, take care of your troops, never compromise your integrity. These are things that are important as a leader. They're just hard to do. One of the best lessons I learned early on was actually as a midshipman here at the University of Texas. In between your freshman and sophomore year, you euphemistically go on what they call a cruise. Well, it's not exactly a cruise. They take the budding officers, of which I was one as a midshipman in the ROTC unit here, and they send us out to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and they make you an enlisted man for 9 weeks. So you live with the enlisted guys on the ship, and so you are scrubbing the decks, you are chipping paint, you are cleaning the heads, you are doing everything that the enlisted men do. And I thought of all the lessons I ever learned in the military on leadership, this was probably the very best lesson. Because you learn that as a leader, every decision you make affects those troops. Every decision the commanding officer of that ship made affect that young sailor who was cleaning the head, or who was chipping the paint, or who was working in the 120-degree boiler room. And you can never forget that as a leader. Because it is easy as you become more and more senior, particularly in the military, but I think it applies to any organization. The more senior you become, the more distance you get from the rank and file, from your employees, from the troops. And you always have to be careful as a leader never to allow that professional distance to get too far. Because when it does, you will make bad decisions and you will forget that those decisions affect the people that work for you. Best lesson I ever had. When I got to SEAL training, so I graduated in 1977, I immediately went off to basic SEAL training in Coronado, California. And the very first day in SEAL training, they give you what we refer to as an IBS, an inflatable boat small. It's a rubber raft, it's about 8 or 10 feet long, weighs a couple hundred pounds when it's fully inflated. And you and your boat crew team, you carry this rubber boat with you everywhere you go. You run to chow, you carry the boat with you. You go, over the dunes when you're on a run, you're bouncing it around in your head. You carry that boat with you everywhere you go. And one of the first tasks they gave us was a pretty simple task. It was, okay, you're the boat crew. There's 7 men in a boat crew. There are 6 enlisted guys, 2 on the front, 2 in the middle, 2 in the back, and then the coxswain, the officer, sits in the back and he's in charge of the boat. And they said, we want you to kind of go out through the surf, paddle down, and then come back in through the surf. Pretty easy task. The trouble is, in Coronado, California, the surf can sometimes get to 8 to 10 feet. And you realize that even in your role as a leader, you have to be part of that team. And everybody in the team has got to pull their weight. So the little rubber boat, you take it out in the number ones, the number 1 men, those who are at the very front of the rubber boat. They have a little strap on the rubber boat. Their job is to point the rubber boat into the oncoming surf. The number 2 guys, they're in the middle. Their job is to stabilize the boat as you're pointing it in. Number 3 guys, their job is to push. And as the coxswain, my job is to jump in and steer the boat. And then as we all get in, you have to all get in simultaneously. Everybody's got a stroke. And I call the stroke count, stroke, stroke. Well, if somebody doesn't stroke as hard as everybody else is, if you don't do your job, the boat will turn sideways and you'll get dumped back onto the beach. And you could potentially get hurt pretty bad. And you realize in the course of this that I'm the leader, but I'm part of the team. And the next important thing about leadership is it's never ever about you. And throughout the course of SEAL training, particularly for the officers, the enlisted guys, for me who are all Vietnam vets, made sure that we never forgot it's about the team. That's why we're called the SEAL teams. So in leadership, you may be the person in charge, but it's never about you, and you can't afford to forget that. You have to hold the people that work for you accountable. And we hear this time and time again, and in the military, we really make a point of holding people accountable. When I was probably 10 or 11 years now in the SEAL teams, I was the executive officer, and the executive officer is the number 2 officer in a SEAL team. So now I've got through basic SEAL training. I'm the number 2 guy 10 years into my career at SEAL Team 1. And while we were there was a training exercise that happened. And we were just starting to do some fairly sophisticated counterterrorism training. This was about 1988. And we were starting to do some sophisticated training, and we set up this kind of mock building, and the idea behind it was a SEAL squad would stack on the door. The first guy's responsibility was to put a breaching charge, demolition against the door. He had a Claymore clacker that would blow the door down. The rest of the team was stacked up against it. And then the last guy in the stack, he had a shotgun, a double-buck shotgun. And his job was, if when the count went 1, 2, 3, and the guy cranked off the demo, if it didn't go, he had to very quickly move around and blow the hinges off the doors so the guys could get in very quickly to kind of get the bad guys. Well, we're doing this training scenario. It's all on film. And again, I was not there at the time, but I had a chance to watch the film. In the course of this, the kid at the end of the stack, big guy. We don't have a whole lot of big guys in the SEAL teams. I'm actually one of the bigger guys because most of the guys going through, you kind of need to be wiry to get through SEAL training. But this guy was probably about 6'3", 6'4", 220, 230, big kid. And he's in the back, and as everybody's stacked on the door, he's got the shotgun down, and you see in the film, he puts his finger in the trigger well. Well, as the charge goes off, he jerks, pulls the trigger, and blows the guy's leg off in front of him. And he didn't even know it. He was so pumped up, they keep going through the door, and then all of a sudden somebody realizes you got a man injured. So we brought everybody back from training, and the guys in the SEAL team said, that were all Vietnam vets, said, hey, look, these things happen. In combat, accidents happen, we need to make sure we just bring this guy in, we kind of chew his tail because he's a good SEAL, he's a good young sailor, and we need to let him continue on. But I had been watching this kid, and he'd been walking around the SEAL compound where we lived, and his head was hung low, and he kind of walked like this, and every once in a while somebody would come up to him and go, "Hey Joe, that's okay, man, it's all okay." But they didn't mean it. They didn't mean it because they recognized that there was a standard we upheld. You never put your finger in the trigger until you're ready to pull the trigger. And he violated a key tenet of being in the SEAL teams and being in a SEAL platoon. So I had a great argument with the command master chief and with the commanding officer, and I said, we have got to hold this kid accountable. We have got to bring him in, do a Navy mast, a very formal event, and we're going to bust him in rank. We're going to take his SEAL trident away. We're going to charge him half his pay, cut his pay in half. We need to do this. We need to send a signal. Well, it became a very controversial issue, but to the commanding officer's credit, he decided to side with me. We brought this kid in, we hammered him, took his SEAL trident away from him, and we put him on probation for a year. And it was interesting to watch him and the rest of the members in the team. He walked out of that, and of course there was an immediate little bit, oh my gosh, I'm gone. But he walked around the compound after that with his head held high because he had been held accountable. And the men around him realized that we had held him accountable, and that's what they expected the leadership to do. Because if you don't hold people accountable, then why would somebody work hard to do the right thing? So you have to understand that it's not just about holding people accountable, it's making sure that the people around you understand that their effort is worthwhile. And this is true, again, I think, in any organization you're in. As a leader, you have to learn to share the hardships and the dangers. And again, it doesn't always apply outside the military, but there are always hardships out there. There is always something you can do to kind of share the workload of your team. When I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, starting in 2003 through when I left in about 2011, about once a week or a couple times a month, I would go out on a mission with the guys. And part of it was, frankly, just to get out of the headquarters I was in and to see what they were doing, but also part of it was to make sure they understood I was going to share the danger with them. I was going to share the hardship with these guys. And that is important for a leader. And however you have the opportunity to do that, whether that's mopping the floors at the 7-Eleven, or whether that's going out on a mission with the guys, showing that you're prepared to share those hardships is incredibly important. I used to always tell the young officers and senior enlisted, work hard never to compromise your integrity. Only you can compromise your integrity. But you will. You will compromise your integrity at some point in time in your career. Because we're all human. It happens. It should make you sick to your stomach when you compromise your integrity, but it will happen. And you have to do the best you can to get over it, try to show that you're better than that, and move on. But really only you can compromise your integrity. And I'd like to tell you, it never happened to me, but it did. At some point in time in your career, you make a mistake, you compromise your integrity, try not to do it because, frankly, it's never, ever worth it. You have to be a good follower. I think the best leaders I've seen sometimes are the very best followers. Again, when I was a junior officer in the military, we understand that the junior officers sometimes, they get a little full of themselves. They come in certainly into the SEAL team, they come into a SEAL team, and they're young and they're steadily, and they see this old guy that is their commanding officer. And I remember sitting in our locker room, because the SEAL teams are frankly much like a sports team. I mean, we have locker rooms, we do PT, we train, we have playbooks, we do all those sorts of things. And there is a locker room sort of approach to sometimes how we do business. And I can remember early on in the locker rooms, we'd get in there and I would hear these young junior officers complaining about the commanding officer. This was a commanding officer who had done 4 tours in Vietnam, but by this time in his life, he's a little overweight. His hair is gone. They don't like the looks of his wife. They've got all these sort of things that they're kind of kibitzing about in the locker room. Absolutely the worst thing that can happen. And I used to tell kids, I said, be careful about being too smug or too righteous when you are not the leader. Learn to be a good follower. Learn to be a good follower. Now, every once in a while, you're going to work for an idiot. That's just life. and you do the best you can. But most of the people that you will work for are well-meaning people. They are trying to do the very best they can. They may fall short, but they are certainly going to fall short if you're not helping them do the job. And finally, as a leader, you can never be afraid to make the next tough decision. In wartime in particular, as a wartime leader, you make decisions every day, and people's lives depend upon it. And sometimes you make the wrong decision. And sometimes people die as a result of the decisions you make. In February of 2011, we had about 20 pirates took over a vessel off the coast of Somalia, a small yacht. There were 4 Americans on it, elderly Americans who were kind of sailing around the world. And I had dealt with pirates a number of times before, and pirates always were just in the business of being pirates. And you didn't negotiate with them, but you knew they weren't going to kill the hostages, because that's not what pirates do. They want the hostages because they want to get money from it. Well, as the course of this kind of hostage situation unfolded, I am actually thousands of miles away, but because of the technology, I am able to watch everything that's happening on high definition video better than, frankly, most people on scene could see it, because we had a television camera from the ship, and I am watching everything unfold. I'm working through the FBI negotiator on the ship. We're kind of talking to the pirates, and I am absolutely certain I know how this thing's going to unfold. I told the pirates, you're not going to get to Somalia. You just need to understand. We're frankly happy to let you go. Let the Americans go, let them on their way. You guys get back on your boats because you're not going anywhere. So let's just have this understanding and everything will be okay. And everything was looking fine until they executed the 4 hostages. And I thought to myself day after day after day, what should I have done differently? What could I have done differently? What should I have anticipated that would have made that outcome better? And so as you think about this as a leader, fortunately by this time, I had spent about 6 years on and off in a combat zone. And I had made a lot of decisions, most of which I think turned out favorably, but not all of them. But I realized at that point in time that you have to keep moving. You have to make the next tough decision, because if you don't, you will never be a great leader. Because you will fail, you will make bad decisions. You have to just realize you got to learn from your mistakes and then go on and make the next best decision you can. Let me talk now about leaders as communicators. So as a leader, everybody understands really to be a great leader, you have to be a great communicator. I tell the story again going back to SEAL training, because I learned a lot in my 6 months in SEAL training. But towards the end of SEAL training, we go out to San Clemente Island. And by this time, we have been in training for almost 6 months. It's the last couple of weeks of SEAL training. And we are learning land warfare training. So we're learning how to be essentially infantrymen, SEALs. And again, all of my instructors were Vietnam veterans. So we did a lot of the skills that they did in Vietnam, ambushes, these sorts of things. Well, this was an ambush drill. And the idea was I was the SEAL platoon commander, 14 guys in my platoon. And the way it works is you have a point man, the guy that is right in front of you, then the officer, myself, is next in line, then there's a communicator, a kid with a radio behind me, automatic weapons man behind that, and then it goes on down line. And our job in this particular drill was to walk down this very narrow path, and we were going to get ambushed. That was part of the drill. And then we had these procedures we had to go through. But we didn't know exactly where the instructors were going to be. And of course, it was all blank ammunition and grenade simulators. So we're patrolling down this narrow trail, and there's high brush on either side. And I know that an ambush is coming, and my responsibility is going to yell ambush right or ambush left. And the way you get out of an ambush is you put as much firepower as you can against the enemy. You have to be able to break contact and then move out of the kill zone. Simple drill. Everything in war is easy. So as we're patrolling down this line, sure enough, the instructors open up on my right. I yell ambush right. Everybody turns. We open up with our automatic fire, blank weapons. We're throwing grenade simulators. And then I get an idea. I realize as we are all lying down, firing, that if I get up and I circle around this kind of hedgerow, I can come up behind the instructors and gun them all down, and we're going to win. And I will be John Wayne. I'll have that John Wayne moment. So In the middle of this, I do just that. I get up, I hop up from my position, I run around the point man, I come up around the back of the hedgerow, they never see me, I've got my automatic weapon, I got them all down. I have never had my ass chewed so bad in my life. But not by the instructors, by the SEAL platoon. They said, "Where did you go?" I said, "What do you mean? We won, I kind of ran around, John Wayne, They said, "That's not what we saw. What we saw was in the middle of the firefight, you ran away." "No, I didn't run away. I ran around to get the bad guy." I realized at that point in time that I had not communicated my intentions. And you have a man on your left and a man on your right, and I didn't tell any of them. I just got up and did it. And that reinforced with me the value of communications. As a leader, you have to communicate your intent every chance you can. And if you fail to do that, you will pay the consequences. But that taught me a lot. Once I graduated from SEAL training again, you're in the military, and the military teaches you in your briefs and in your words to be, powerful but parsimonious. Make sure your words mean something, make sure they are clear, that they are simple. As we got into the fights in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I was a 3-star, we were doing, again, somewhere in the neighborhood of 15, 20, in some cases 25 missions a night. And then some of them would be these special missions where I would have to brief the commander or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, or I would have to brief the White House. And my staff, I had a very professional staff. I remember the first time we did this, I said, "Okay guys, we got this kind of special mission we're doing. I've got what's called the Commander's Action Group," and they put all the slides together. And so they send me this slide deck that is 48 slides long. I said, "I am not going to brief the President of the United States with 48 slides." They said, "Sir, you got to cover this, you got to cover this." Stop. I said, I want 5 slides. I said, "Sir, you can't do this in 5. I want 5 slides." Well, they got back and 48 became 30. No, the number I'm looking for is 5. And they had trouble getting there. Finally, I said, "To hell with it, I'm going to do my own slides." Didn't make my staff happy, so I kind of did my own slides. And we briefed the chairman and the White House. And it was important to recognize that I had to get the concept across. And sometimes you accept the risk as a leader of realizing that you're not communicating everything. So as a leader communicator, leader being the operative word first, you have to understand your audience well enough to know what is important to communicate. A 48-slide brief, or in one case, a 102-slide brief, my staff did not survive that one too well. You have to understand what is important for the decision maker above you to make the right decision. Now, I wasn't always right. Sometimes 5 slides was not enough, but as a leader communicator, you have to understand your audience. You also have to understand that as a leader, you are going to assume risk as a leader, and you need to make sure you communicate that risk well. Also, as a leader, you have to use your language to inspire. Probably in the military, when you look back over the great leaders we have had in all militaries in all time, it is a lot about inspiring the troops. Probably the toughest thing I always had to deal with in Iraq and Afghanistan was I did dozens of memorial services where we lost a kid in combat. And so in the course of a memorial service, because I was generally the senior officer, you have to get up and you have to do 3 things. You have to pay respect to the fallen, you have to console the living, and then you have to get them back to doing the mission, because that's what you're there for. That is always a difficult balance, paying respect, consoling, and then saying, "I got it, boys, but we got a mission to do." And this young troop that's fallen, he would want us to do that. You have to spend your time and think about the importance of your words. I would pull everything from the Bible to Churchill to Kennedy to wherever I could get inspiration to be able to make sure that the words were right. And of course, in the military, sometimes small words have powerful meanings. You look at mottos. We in the military, everybody's got a motto. I think about the young Rangers, Army Rangers that work for me, and their motto is, "Rangers lead the way." Rangers lead the way. Every young Ranger understands that he has an obligation to lead the way, because that's what the motto says, lead the way. Navy Seabees can do. You tell a Seabee that, I'm sorry, this is probably going to be too difficult, they will not believe it because their motto says can do. You think about even here at the University of Texas, what starts here changes the world. What starts here changes the world. Every one of you should understand and appreciate what that means. Words are important. Winston Churchill once said that courage is rightly esteemed the first of human qualities because it is the quality that guarantees all others. It is the quality that guarantees all others. If you want to be a leader, if you want to be a leader that communicates greatly, if you want to be a communicator that leads, at the end of the day, it is about your courage. It is about your courage as a leader. It is about your courage to speak truth to power. It is about your courage to hold people accountable. It is about your courage to hold yourself accountable. And so, again, Dean, thank you very much. To the Moody College, thank you for inviting me here this evening. I am incredibly proud to be a graduate of this great institution and this great college. And when I look out in the audience, I couldn't be prouder of the work that goes on here and the great students that are sitting in the audience today. So thank you very much.